The private airfield buzzed with urgency as engineers circled around a silent helicopter, its blades still and its lights flickering. The Billionaire CEO Ava Sterling stood nearby, arms crossed, her voice sharp as she demanded answers from her team. "Why isn't it working? We're supposed to leave in 15 minutes. One of the engineers wiped sweat from his forehead. "Ma'am, the system failed mid-test. We don't know why yet. We're running diagnostics." She groaned in frustration, tapping her heel against the concrete. "I don't want excuses, I want results." A small voice spoke up from behind her. "Maybe my daddy can fix it." Everyone turned, the sound completely out of place among the tense crew. A little girl about 6 stood there clutching a lunchbox, her brown hair tied in 2 uneven pigtails. Ava blinked, startled. "And who's your daddy, sweetie?" The girl pointed toward the janitor sweeping near the hangar entrance, her voice proud. "My dad. He fixes everything." The janitor froze mid-sweep, looking both embarrassed and nervous. As all eyes turned to him, his name tag read Ben Rivers. Ava raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Your dad is a janitor, sweetheart, not an engineer," but the girl's confident smile didn't fade. "He can fix things better than anyone." Ava almost laughed before sighing. "All right then, let's see what your miracle dad can do." Ben hesitated. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to cause trouble." Ava gestured toward the helicopter. "Go on, impress us if you can." She said the words sharp but curious. Ben looked down at his daughter, who gave him an encouraging nod, then walked slowly toward the aircraft. The engineers exchanged doubtful glances. Within minutes, he was on his knees beside the engine panel, his movements calm and precise, every wire he touched deliberate. He didn't look like a janitor anymore. He looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Ava frowned, leaning closer. Watching the silent authority in his hands, he muttered softly to himself, checking the ignition relay, and within moments the engine roared back to life. The crowd gasped. The little girl clapped proudly. "See, told you." Ava stood frozen, the wind from the blades brushing against her face, and for the first time in years she was speechless. The noise from the helicopter faded as the rotors slowed. Everyone stood watching Ben step back, wiping his hands on a rag, while the engine purred like new. Ava stared at him, stunned. She had hired the best engineers in the country, and not one of them had done what he just did. She finally spoke, her tone softer, but still laced with disbelief. "How did you do that?" Ben straightened, adjusting his worn gloves. "Just an electrical feedback in the starter relay, ma'am. It happens when the voltage regulator misfires. Most people reset the system instead of recalibrating it." She blinked, trying to process his words. "You talk like an engineer, not a janitor." He gave a small smile. "Maybe I used to be one." A murmur spread through the team. One of the engineers whispered, "He's right, that's exactly what caused it." Ava stepped closer, studying him. "You worked in aviation." He nodded quietly. "For 15 years, until the company I worked for shut down after a merger. I couldn't find another position, so I took whatever job I could to keep food on the table." She glanced down at the little girl clutching her lunchbox, her voice softening. "And her mother?" He hesitated for a second. "Gone. She passed away 3 years ago." The words, simple but heavy. His daughter looked up at him, smiling proudly. "It's okay, Daddy fixes everything, even." Ava's chest tightened, the confidence in the girl's voice cutting deeper than any business deal ever had. She knelt down to the child's level and said gently, "You must be very proud of him." The girl nodded, beaming. "He's my hero. He can fix anything, even when he's sad." Ava looked up at Ben, her expression unreadable. Before standing again, she took a deep breath. "You just saved a multi-million-dollar aircraft, Mr. Rivers. That's not something I forget easily." Ben shrugged quietly. "I just did what needed doing, Mom." But Ava shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You reminded me that real skill doesn't always wear a suit." She turned to her assistant. "Get HR on the line. I want his full file, and tell them to suspend his janitorial duties for now." Her assistant blinked, confused. Ma'am Ava's tone was firm. "He doesn't belong with a mop anymore." By the next morning, the entire company was talking about the janitor who fixed the CEO's helicopter. Ben arrived early, as always ready to clean the hangars before sunrise, but instead of a mop waiting for him, there was a crisp white envelope sitting on the break room table, his name printed neatly on the front. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter with the Hale Aviation logo at the top and a single line that made him stop breathing. Report to the executive office at 9 a.m. Ava Sterling. He showed up at exactly 9, his uniform still the same. His hands, rough and calloused, Ava's assistant greeted him with a polite smile before ushering him into a large office overlooking the runway. Ava stood by the window, her tone calm but warm. I did some digging last night, Mr. Rivers. Turns out you weren't just an engineer. You were one of the lead developers on the X9 rotor program for Skytech. He nodded quietly. Yes, ma'am, before the merger shut us down. She crossed her arms. And you haven't worked in your field since? He gave a small shrug. Life doesn't always take the path we expect, but I had my daughter to raise, so I stopped fighting it. She looked at him for a moment, then said softly, What you did yesterday saved millions and, more importantly, lives. I want you back in engineering starting today, full benefits, full salary. His eyes widened, but his first thought was of his daughter. That's more than I can ever repay, ma'am. She smiled. You already did when you made that helicopter fly. Again. Just then the office door opened and his little girl peeked in, holding a lunchbox, the same one she carried everywhere. Ava smiled, kneeling to her level. Hello, sweetheart. The girl smiled shyly. Daddy said you're his new boss. Ava laughed. Well, I suppose I am, but I think your dad might just be my new teacher. Ben looked at her confused. Teacher. She nodded. When I built this company, I thought I knew everything yesterday. You reminded me that real value isn't on a resume. It's in resilience. I want you to help rebuild our training division. Start by teaching the people here what patience and problem-solving actually look like. He hesitated, then smiled softly. I'd be honored. Ava extended her hand. Welcome back to where you belong, Mr. Rivers. He shook it firmly, his daughter watching with wide, proud eyes. Months later, the sound of engines filled the hangar again, but this time the energy was different. People worked with purpose, laughter echoing where tension used to live. The company that once ran on ego now ran on respect, and the change began with a janitor turned engineer. Ben's name was on every major repair board. Every technician learned from him, not just about machines, but about perseverance and humility. Even Ava found herself visiting the hangar more often, watching him teach younger workers how to think, not just follow. One afternoon she found him sitting with his daughter on the steps outside the hangar, sharing sandwiches under the open sky. Ava walked over. Smiling, mind if I join you? Ben grinned. Of course not, boss, though. I still prefer when you just call me Ben. She sat down beside them. The girl offered half her sandwich. Ava smiled, taking it. Thank you, sweetheart. The little one said proudly. Daddy says you're the nicest boss he's ever had. Ava chuckled. I'll take that compliment. After a moment she turned to Ben. You know, since you came back, we've had fewer breakdowns, more innovation, and more teamwork. I keep getting credit for it, but we both know it started with you. He shook his head quietly. No, ma'am, it started with my daughter believing in me when I didn't. She looked at the little girl and said softly, Smart kid. The girl smiled. That's what Daddy says about me all the time. Ava laughed, then looked back at him. Seriously, Ben, you could have gone anywhere. Why stay here? He met her gaze, calm and steady. Because this place gave me a second chance, and I want to make sure no one here ever forgets what that feels like. She nodded, her voice gentle. Then I guess we'll make that part of our company's legacy. She stood, brushing the dust from her hands, and said with a smile, Come on, you two. The world could use more people who fix things instead of walking away from them. As the sun dipped behind the hangar, the three of them stood watching the golden light reflect off the helicopter that started it all the same, one that had been silent and broken until someone with rough hands and a kind heart brought it back to life, and somewhere between the hum of the engines and the laughter of a little girl, Ava Sterling realized that success wasn't measured by wealth or power. It was measured by the courage to keep believing when the world stops noticing. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.